America was built on dissent. The American secession from the British Empire in 1776 symbolized the birth of our defiant spirit. The Declaration of Independence was a document of rebellion against the suffocating control of the British. Thomas Jefferson said, "The spirit of resistance to government is so valuable on certain occasions that I wish it to be always kept alive. The people are the only sure reliance for the preservation of our liberty." In the 1830s, the American institution of slavery met strong resistance. William Lloyd Garrison was a dissenter who established an anti-slavery newspaper and helped to found the American Anti-Slavery Society. Garrison wrote that, "On this subject of immediate emancipation, I do not wish to think or speak or write with moderation. I am in earnest. I will not equivocate. I will not retreat a single inch, and I will be heard." In 1866, an iron worker by the name of William H. Silvis continued the American tradition of dissent by founding the National Labor Union. This allowed workers to band together and fight the exploitive corporations that employed them. Labor unions revolted against their employers with violent and bloody strikes in defiance of long hours, low pay, and horrendous working conditions. At the turn of the 20th century, women protested the government policies that prohibited them from voting. Organizations such as the National Women's Party and the College Equals Suffrage League fought for a woman's right to vote. Dissent has also taken shape in the arts. Jazz is a rebellious style of music indigenous to America. In the late 40s and 50s, bebop musicians such as Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, and Thelonious Monk rebelled against musical conformity and disregarded the tastes of the public. They pushed the boundaries of creative expression by bending the conventional rules of music. Jazz was an expression of the frustration and anger felt by African Americans. In 1947, Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in Major League Baseball. Robinson endured insults from the stands, metal cleat wounds from opposing players, and death threats. He held his ground and stayed true to his belief that a life is not important except in the impact it has on other lives. The 1960s in America was a decade drenched in dissent and social consciousness. In California, Cesar Chavez fought to improve Mexican-American farm workers' long hours of backbreaking work for little pay and few benefits. Chavez led frequent union strikes and went on a 3-week fast to improve the workers' plight. In 1964, the free speech movement was bred from a clash between students and administrators over free speech on the UC Berkeley campus. This movement was led by a philosophy major named Mario Savia.
There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart, that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
The movement quickly spread to college campuses throughout the country. The civil rights movement in America represented dissent in its most essential form. Thurgood Marshall, Malcolm X, Stokely Carmichael, and Martin Luther King Jr. were all devoted to the battle for African American freedom. Rosa Parks embodied dissent when she risked her own safety and refused to be moved from her seat. The Vietnam War sparked an entire counterculture of dissenters. The Students for a Democratic Society organized countless protests. In recent decades, the spirit of American dissent seems to have diminished. In 2005, a Knight Foundation study surveyed more than 100,000 students at nearly 600 public and private high schools and found that 3/4 of the students didn't have an opinion about the First Amendment or took it for granted. Once the First Amendment was explained, a third of the students thought it went too far in granting free speech, and half thought the government should have the authority to okay news stories. What has caused this indifference towards freedom?
Do you think that in Berkeley and at the UC campus, dissent has kind of diminished over the years and isn't as prevalent as it once was in the past?
I don't know.
Exercising my right to free speech, exercising my fuck you rights, and to say why. I have to do that in order to help myself feel balanced and sane in the context of a culture that's insane.
The state of dissent here, it's something worth laughing about.
Has superficial comfort and the obsession with materialism taken the place of dissent in people's lives?
In an affluent community, you have people who have a lot more. They've acquired a lot more. They have a lot more to lose.
You look at third world countries, or you look at countries with real poor people, and the slightest indignity can cause a massive sort of uprising because people already are kind of unhappy. But when you're spoiled, rotten like U.S. The U.S. population is, we have everything. There's nothing to really get so worked up about.
At UC Santa Barbara, I did not see much that was going on as far as protests. The student climate there was not much against the war.
You point out the economy. I mean, in one way, people are more materially comfortable than they've ever been. I mean, they have cars, TVs, internet, computers, all this kind of stuff.
Has affluence caused people to be apathetic towards anything larger than themselves?
Our government's destroying the planet, and everybody's walking around like no big deal. People aren't out in the streets very much. People aren't destroying shit to make them stop.
If meaningful dissent has faded, then a void exists in the American character. If rebellion has been swept away by the rising tide of conformity, then a part of our heritage has been lost.